If you open the article and you see what he said was his reasoning, he wanted to provide more opportunities for WNBA players and provide opportunities to not go overseas. So you offered the contract to a player who's not yet even in the WNBA. If you're going to say that it's for that, then stand on that. But I think he's trying to make a business decision, which he's a businessman, that makes sense. But to mask it in this, I want to uplift and support WNBA players and women athletes, is kind of a cop-out, I think.
When was the last time a single athlete, not a team, not a franchise, not a league, but a single human being walked into a sport and fundamentally, permanently, irreversibly changed everything about it? Because that's what we're talking about today. That's what is actually happening right now in front of our eyes. And honestly, half the country doesn't even fully realize it yet. Half the sports world is still debating whether this is real. Half the so-called experts are still sitting on their hands, folding their arms, and squinting their eyes like they're watching a magic trick and trying to figure out where the rabbit is hidden. But there is no trick. There is no illusion. There is no asterisk. There is only Caitlin Clark. And the sooner everybody, the doubters, the haters, the skeptics, the bitter former players, the armchair critics, the sooner all of them come to terms with what they are witnessing, the sooner this conversation can move from "is she really that good?" to the question that actually matters. How often does a moment like this come along? The answer? Almost never. We're talking once in a generation. Maybe once in a lifetime. And if you are watching sports right now, in this era, you are living through one of those moments. So today, right here, right now, we are going to break it all the way down. We're going to talk about what Caitlin Clark has actually done. What she has actually built. What she has actually changed. We're going to talk about the people who have tried to diminish her, why they've done it, and what it says not about her, but about them. We're going to talk about the cultural earthquake that is still shaking the foundation of women's sports, and why when the dust finally settles, nothing will ever look the same. This is the Caitlin Clark story. And it is only just beginning. To truly understand what Caitlin Clark means, you have to understand what women's basketball looked like before she arrived. Because this is important. This is the context that so many people skip over when they're having this conversation, and without it, you cannot fully appreciate the magnitude of what has happened. Women's basketball, particularly at the professional level in the WNBA, had been fighting the same battle for decades. A battle for attention. A battle for respect. A battle for eyeballs. For sponsorship dollars. For arenas that weren't half empty. For television contracts that didn't feel like charity deals handed out by networks who weren't quite sure if they wanted to be involved. Now let's be clear, the talent has always been there. The WNBA has always been full of extraordinary athletes. World-class players. Women who in any other era, in any other sport, would have been household names with generational fame and endorsement deals that...
Look, SVP, reality is coming.
Okay.
There's levels to this thing, and that's just life. We all went through it. And you see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side, where, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Made your eyes water. But the audience wasn't there. Not at scale. Not at the level the sport deserved. And that's the frustrating, painful, complicated truth about women's sports in America. It has historically been a case of the chicken and the egg. Networks wouldn't invest because the ratings weren't there. Ratings weren't there because promotion was minimal.
I am a hidden figure, but no longer now. My record was hidden from everyone for 43 years. 43 years. I don't think, I'll just go ahead and get the old out now. I don't think my record has been broken because you can't duplicate what you're not duplicating. And, so unless you talk with a men's basketball and 2-point shot,
Promotion was minimal because advertisers weren't spending. Advertisers weren't spending because the audience felt small. Round and round it went, year after year, decade after decade. Sure, there were bright spots. Moments that cracked the ceiling. The 1996 Olympics gave the sport a jolt. The original dream team of women's basketball, Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, Dawn Staley, they were transcendent. And the WNBA's founding year in 1997 brought genuine excitement. There were flashes of cultural relevance. Individual players who crossed over into mainstream consciousness. But nothing that stuck. Nothing that fundamentally broke the cycle. Until now. But before we get to now, we need to talk about the conditions that made now possible. Because Caitlin Clark didn't emerge in a vacuum. She arrived at a specific moment, when the infrastructure was just barely beginning to improve. When WNBA ownership was starting to shift, from men and women who treated their franchises like expensive hobbies or tax write-offs, to serious investors who saw real business potential, who understood that the product was excellent and the market was underserved, and that the gap between those two realities represented a massive opportunity. The soil was being prepared, but it needed a seed. And in the fall of 2020, Caitlin Clark walked onto the campus of the University of Iowa. And everything that came next? Nobody saw it coming. Not at that scale. Not at that speed. Not like this.
So will Caitlin Clark be a good pro? Absolutely. Will Caitlin Clark come into the WNBA and do what she's doing right now? Immediately? Absolutely not gonna happen. So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year, and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record? Yeah, that'll go in the record book as Caitlin Clark is the all-time, whatever it is. I don't even know what the number is, but that's the way it'll be. And I don't think it should be.
Here's the thing about greatness. Real, authentic, generational greatness. It doesn't announce itself with a press release. It doesn't show up with a marketing campaign or a carefully crafted narrative. It just shows up. And it shows up in a way that makes you feel something you can't quite name, a mix of disbelief and recognition, like some part of you always knew something like this existed, but you'd never actually seen it before. That's what watching Caitlin Clark feels like. From the very beginning, there was something different. Something that separated her not just from the other players on the floor, but from the entire history of the sport as most people had understood it. It started with the shooting. Now, when we say Caitlin Clark can shoot, we don't mean she has a nice stroke. We don't mean she's reliable from three. We don't mean she's a threat from the perimeter that defenses have to respect. We mean she is doing things with a basketball that have no business existing in the women's college game. Or in men's college basketball, for that matter. We mean she is pulling up from the logo, the half-court logo, sometimes even beyond it, with the same casual, easy confidence that most players reserve for mid-range jumpers. We mean she is operating from ranges that coaches historically told players never to attempt in games because the math simply didn't work. Except when Caitlin Clark shoots them, the math works. The ball goes in. And then she turns around, hits you with that look, that unapologetic, ice-cold, unbothered expression that says, yes, I meant to do that. Yes, I'll do it again. And no, there is nothing you can do about it. That's part of what makes her so compelling, and so polarizing, and ultimately so important for the sport. She doesn't play like someone who is grateful to be on the court. She doesn't play like someone who is aware of the limitations that have historically been placed on women's basketball. She plays like someone who watched the very best players in the history of the NBA, the Kais, the Lillards, the Donitches, and decided to not just incorporate their game, but to bring it wholesale into the women's college game. And then she added something those players don't even have. She added theater. The logo threes aren't just shots. They're statements. They're exclamation points. They're a declaration sent out to everyone watching, the fans, the opposing players, the doubters scrolling through their phones, that the rules of what is possible here have changed. And then there's the passing. This is the part that sometimes gets overlooked in the conversation about Clark, because the shooting is so loud, so dramatic, so unmissable. But the passing is what separates her from a highlight reel and makes her a player. The vision. The creativity. The ability to see 3 passes ahead of where the play currently is. The behind-the-back feeds in transition. The no-look dimes in the lane. The court awareness that allows her to simultaneously dominate the ball and create for everyone around her. She doesn't just score. She orchestrates. And when you combine that shooting range with that passing vision, with that competitive fire, with that leadership presence, with that trash talk. Yes, we're going to talk about the trash talk, because it matters. What you get is someone who doesn't fit into any pre-existing category in women's basketball. She's not like anyone who came before her. She's Caitlin Clark. And she's building something, legendary programs, Hall of Fame names, And at the top of that list, sitting above everyone, is a woman from West Des Moines, Iowa, who plays for the Hawkeyes. Let that land for a moment. Think about what that record actually means. Think about all the names between here and there. Pete Maravich, Austin Carr. Steph Curry was a college player. Kevin Durant was a college player. The greatest men's players in the history of the sport played college basketball, and none of them, scored more points than Caitlin Clark. That is not a women's basketball record. That is a basketball record. Full stop. And then there's the trajectory of Iowa women's basketball as an institution. Before Caitlin Clark arrived, the Iowa Hawkeyes had never made a national championship game in women's basketball. Not once in the program's history. In back-to-back seasons with Clark leading the charge, they made it to the national title game twice. 2 consecutive Final Fours. 2 consecutive shots at a championship. The program didn't just improve. It transformed. And then there are the ratings numbers. Because this is where you can see, in cold hard data, the cultural earthquake that Clark has triggered. The 2023 Final Four game between Iowa and South Carolina, an unbeaten South Carolina squad widely considered one of the best teams in the country, drew an average of 5.5 million viewers. For a women's college basketball game in April, 5.5 million people. That was unprecedented. That was the kind of number that makes network executives blink and look at it again, and then look at each other and say, wait, is this right? It was right. And then the national championship game that same year, Clark and Iowa against Angel Reese and LSU, drew nearly 13 million viewers. 13 million people watching women's college basketball. The highest-rated women's college basketball game in history at that point. By a significant margin. Think about that number in context. That's more people than watch most regular season NFL games. That's more people than watch most NBA playoff games. 13 million people showed up because they wanted to see what was going to happen when Caitlin Clark walked onto the floor against another great player in the biggest game of the year. And those weren't casual sports fans who stumbled onto the channel. Those were people who had been drawn in, converted, made into fans of women's basketball specifically because of what Caitlin Clark was doing and how she was doing it. But even that wasn't the ceiling. The following season, the rematch between Iowa and LSU, a regular season tournament game, not a national championship, drew 12.3 million viewers on a Monday night. 12.3 million people on a Monday night in March for a game that wasn't even the final. Iowa played to sold-out arenas across the country. Not just at home. On the road, in opposing teams' buildings, fans showed up to watch Caitlin Clark play. The opponent's fans showed up hoping to see her play. She had transcended school loyalty. She had transcended conference affiliation. She had become the attraction. She had become, in the truest sense of the word, a superstar. And superstars, as we know, don't just improve the sport they play in. They transform it. Now here's where this story gets complicated. And human. And honestly, if you're paying attention, a little heartbreaking. Because not everyone cheered. And that matters. Not because the doubters are right, they aren't, but because the reasons behind the doubt reveal something important about women's sports, about legacy, about insecurity, and about how difficult it is to watch someone rewrite history in real time. Let's start with Diana Taurasi. Diana Taurasi is, by any fair measure, one of the greatest women's basketball players who has ever lived. A Phoenix Mercury legend. A multiple-time Olympic gold medalist. A player who dominated her era with a style and ferocity that commanded respect and admiration from everyone who watched. So when Taurasi was asked about Caitlin Clark's impending arrival in the WNBA, you might have expected a moment of welcome. A passing of the torch. A veteran champion acknowledging the arrival of the next great player. Instead, what you got was this, a warning. Or more accurately, a dismissal dressed up as wisdom. Reality is coming, Taurasi said, with a laugh. There are levels to this thing. You look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to meet some grown women who have been playing professional basketball for a long time. Now, to be fair to Taurasi, there is a kernel of truth buried in there. The jump from college to professional basketball is real. It is significant. No rookie, no matter how talented, comes into the WNBA and immediately operates at the exact same level they did in college. The speed is different. The physicality is different. The defensive schemes are different. The athletes are different. That part is true. But that's not really what Taurasi was saying. And she knows it. And everyone who watched that interview knows it. She wasn't offering a nuanced, measured assessment of the college-to-pro transition. She was drawing a line in the sand. She was, whether consciously or not, suggesting that what Clark had done at Iowa existed in a separate, lesser category. That the things she'd accomplished, the records, the ratings, the cultural moment, were somehow contingent on playing against inferior competition, and that when the real test came, the bubble would burst. The problem with that framing is that it has never, not once, been applied with the same energy to great men's college players entering the NBA. When a dominant college player gets drafted number 1 overall and steps into the pros, nobody, not legends, not analysts, not former stars, prefaces it with reality is coming. Nobody undermines the college achievements by pointing out that college players are younger and less experienced than pros. The double standard is impossible to ignore. And then there was Cheryl Swoops. Swoops is another legend. One of the original pillars of women's professional basketball. A pioneer. Someone who helped build the WNBA from the ground up in an era when there was no blueprint, no audience, and no guarantee that the league would survive its first decade. Her contributions to the sport are real, and they are enormous, and they deserve to be honored. But what Swoops said about Clark was factually incorrect in a way that went largely unchallenged in the moment. Swoops suggested that Clark's all-time scoring record was essentially illegitimate, that Clark had benefited from an extra year of eligibility due to the COVID year that many college athletes received, giving her more time to accumulate points than she should have had. She specifically compared Clark to Kelsey Plum, who had previously held the all-time women's scoring record, suggesting Plum would have broken the men's record too if she'd been given the same amount of time. The issue? The facts don't support the argument. Caitlin Clark played 4 seasons of college basketball. The same number of seasons Kelsey Plum played. Clark did not take a COVID year. She did not have an extra season. She broke the record in the same amount of time, and in many cases under more scrutiny, with more eyes in higher stakes games, with defenses specifically designed to stop her and her alone. The record isn't a technicality. It isn't a footnote. It is exactly what it appears to be. And then there was Lynette Woodard. Woodard was the first woman to play for the Harlem Globetrotters. She was a legitimate pioneer of the sport. Her own record, the all-time women's scoring record before Kelsey Plum broke it, stood for 43 years. 43 years. That is an almost incomprehensible span of time in sports. When Caitlin Clark surpassed Plum and became the all-time NCAA scorer, Woodard stood up at a coaches' convention and made her case that her record hadn't really been broken. Her reasoning: when she played, the game was different. Women used a men's basketball, which is larger and heavier. There was no three-point line. The rules were different, the conditions were different, and therefore the records existed in separate, incomparable categories. You can't duplicate what you're not duplicating, Woodard said, unless you come up with a men's basketball and a two-point shot. And look, on a purely technical level, you can understand where she's coming from. You can understand the feeling of watching a record you've held for over 4 decades get surpassed and wanting to contextualize it. Wanting to point out the differences. Wanting some acknowledgement of the conditions under which you played and what it took to accomplish what you accomplished. That's human.